Thank you all for joining us this morning. We are joined by Bob Hinton, defensive coordinator, and linebackers coach Marcus Freeman. So if you do have a question, please go ahead and use the raise hand function. Coach, we're going to start off with a question from Tim Priester.
Coach, good morning. In talking to some of the defensive players, they were mentioning about how they feel free and easy and they can cut it loose and play free. I was wondering how you as a coordinator are able to, balance that aggression with the simplicity of your scheme and be effective in being able to balance that.
Well, we want to be aggressive in what we do. And I think sometimes giving those guys the opportunity to cut loose and to be disruptive is kind of what they're talking about. And so it still has to fit within the scheme. I think once they continue to get to know the scheme and get to know exactly what we're looking for, there's some freedom within there to be a football player, and I believe in we're going to play football. I tell them all the time, let's be football players, not football players. Sometimes it's not going to be perfect, but if you continue to play with great effort and attitude, you're disruptive, good things will happen.
We'll go next to Tyler James.
Marcus, how much have what you've seen from the defensive line this spring informed what you want your scheme to resemble this first season? Does it give you confidence to be more dependent on the defensive line when sort of drawing things up?
Yeah, we've always been and will always be a defensive line driven program. And so that means that as our defensive line goes, our defense will go. And so they've done an excellent job. They've done an unbelievable job. They're extremely deep at the position. And, as they continue to play well, it makes our job behind them that much easier. And so Coach Olson's done an unbelievable job with those guys to get them to learn the scheme, get them to learn the things that we want them to do. And it's made it easier for the transition of linebackers and safeties and corners to make the transition of a new defense.
We'll hand it over next to Matt Freeman.
Hey, Marcus. I just had two quick questions about two players. Tariq Bracy kind of had his ups and downs last year. And then there's been a few clips of him sent out making a few interceptions this spring. What kind of spring has he had to this point? And then the other guy is we've kind of seen you have Jordan Botello line up all over the place. What's his spring been like, and what about his skill set makes him allowed to play at different levels?
Well, I'll start with Reek. He's had an excellent spring. Through 11 practices, he's been really consistent and one of our most consistent defensive backs that we've had on the field. And again, he's a guy that I'm starting to see. I don't know what he was like before I got here. And as I told him the first day I got here, I make my opinion of you from the first day I met you. And so he's in here watching extra film. He's consistently meeting with Coach Mickens and the corners and just trying to get better at his craft. And I think he's doing the little things off the field that it takes to be a successful player. And so you're seeing the results of his sacrifice and his attention to details on the field. And so he's having a heck of a spring. He's done a great job in 11 practices. Jordan, as we talk about being disruptive, Jordan is one of the leaders of being disruptive. He's playing extremely fast. He plays with a violence that at times you got to say, slow down a little bit. I know Drew White would tell him to slow down after he kind of rode up on Drew White earlier in the spring. But that's the way Jordan plays the game. If we can continue to get him lined up right, continue to get him to understand exactly what he has to do within each defense, he's going to just get better and better. But he plays with the effort and attitude, the reckless abandon that we need every member of our defense to play with. And so I think that's why you've seen him flash. That's why you've seen him make some havoc plays in the background, because he plays with an unbelievable motor. And he's a guy that we'll use at multiple different positions. We experiment him with many at linebacker, at Viper, at field end, maybe at times. And just he's a guy that you can move all over the field.
We'll go next to Tim O'Malley.
Coach, you mentioned Drew White's injury, and we see Bo Bauer flash quite a bit in these videos. Is it possible in your scheme for the two of them to be on the field together? I know they were used well in tandem last year at Mike linebacker. Are their skills too much alike to be out there together in the fall?
No. What we'll do is as we get into fall, we'll start with the best 3 linebackers and put them on the field. I don't care what position. I'm trying to cross-train those guys at multiple different positions, just so that we can figure out, hey, who's the best 3 for this package? And Bo and Drew are 2 guys definitely that I could see being on the field at the same time. He's done a great job in terms of not only his production. He's always been a productive linebacker. You watch him play football last year, he's been productive. But I've seen his leadership step up a little bit, especially in the linebacker room. Not having Drew out there, you miss some of that leadership, some of the confidence to get people lined up, some of the confidence to always make the right calls. And that's what I'm seeing Bo take major strides in doing. And he's done a great job. He's had a great spring. He's continuously improving. He's getting better day to day. And I'm excited for these last 4 practices, see how he continues to develop.
We'll go next to Eric Hansen.
Hey, Coach, the rover position was one that was really talked about last year, basically because of the guy who played at Jeremiah. I wondered if you could share your impressions of Jack Kaiser, who's playing whatever it's modified into. And then also, as you go out on the recruiting trail, how are you looking at that position differently? What kind of traits are you looking at for that position?
Well, I mean, we'll start with Jack. He's done a really good job. Jack is an extremely intelligent individual. And he works and studies. And, he's athletic. He's physical. He makes a lot of plays. And so he's done a great job. We're trying to move him around and put him in different, again, we're trying to move that rover around so you don't always know where he's going to be aligned. But at the end of the day, the guy has to be a disruptive edge setter. He has to be a guy that can play in coverage, and Kaiser and Pryor, both of those guys are doing a heck of a job at the rover position. And I expect big things out of both of them. When you talk about what we look for in that position, there's a guy that played here previously named Jeremiah Owusu that, he kind of fits that mold. If there's a perfect rover, you would look for the traits that he possesses. But again, there's only one of those guys. But that's what we want to see. And that's what our guys are doing. Even Kaiser and Pryor, both of those guys are athletic. They play extremely hard. They're intelligent. They understand the angles and the different leverages you have to play within the pass game. That's something that, I think sometimes is undervalued, is the ability to understand angles and understand the depth perception of you and a receiver and a quarterback. And, hey, exactly what angle do I need to drop at so I'm in the throwing lane of the 7 cut or the out route, and also I can break down to the shallow route and stuff like that. So it takes some intelligence. It really does. Athleticism, but intelligence to play that position. But, those 2 guys are doing a great job. And, again, we would fit this pretty well too.
We'll hand it over next to Patrick Engel.
Marcus, I have a 2-parter for you. When you were looking at the defensive line and what you wanted to do with that, what about Myron Tagovailoa's skill set did you see that would translate well to a defensive end? And then when we talked to Isaiah Foskey, we heard him talk about some more coverage responsibilities for that Viper drop end position. I'm curious how you've seen him and Jordan kind of handle those and make some strides there and as a cover guy.
Yeah. When I first got the job, I called Coach Mickens, who obviously I'm close with from high school and from Cincinnati. And I said, hey, I need to know who the leaders are, who's been the leaders path in previous seasons of this defense. And one of the guys he said was Myron. And so I remember reaching out to Myron and what an infectious attitude and energy the guy gives off. And so I had long talks with Coach Elston about him. And I thought in my head, hey, he's going to come back being a defensive tackle and Heinrich would be the nose and let's go. But, they talked about for him wanting to play the defensive end position. And, he's athletic enough. He was maybe a little big, but he's lost 15 pounds, I think, from last season in order to make that transition from inside at the tackle spot to playing outside at end. And he's done an excellent job. I would think he would tell you, man, he loves being at the end position, but he brings a physical aspect to the run game too. He is not out there just to be a pass rusher. That's an added bonus for him. And then when we go to third down, he's a guy that will probably move back inside and get maybe some more edge rushers with length out there. So he's done an unbelievable job of making that transition from tackle to end. We're trying to do a couple different things with him to try to continue to free him up and give him the ability to go make plays within the scheme. But he's had a great spring. As far as Foskey, I remember when I first got there, everybody said, hey, man, he's the potential first-round pick of the future, and he's done a great job. He's working at it. Foskey hasn't played a whole bunch of football, and that's a point of emphasis that we continue to make. We need to continue to get his football intelligence up and get him reps and reps and reps. But he made a major stride from week 2 to 3. I think last week he had a really, really good week, and he put together 3 consistently good practices. And just from being out there today, I think he did a good job just from where I could see from the sideline. So we'll watch film of today's practice, but he's a guy that's continuing to get better, as is Portello. Those two are guys that will push each other, that will make our defense better because of the challenges they'll present to each other, and to be able to push each other and make each other better, the healthy competition that we talk about, it's gonna really be infectious to our whole defense.
We'll go next to Bryan Driskell.
Coach, I have a bit of a philosophical question for you. When you look at your defense and you look about ideally putting it together, do you prefer to kind of, you obviously have a defense that's versatile and mixes things up. Do you prefer to be able to be versatile within the same personnel grouping? Do you prefer to be versatile where you have to sub packages kind of like we see in the NFL, or do you kind of prefer to be able to do both from a week-to-week basis?
Our whole philosophy is front multiplicity, coverage consistency. So within each package, 4D linemen, 3D linemen, we still have to be multiple up front. And that's something that we'll spend time and time just trying to continue to develop and expand the package. And so we want to continue to be multiple in the fronts, multiple in the movements up front, multiple in the ways we blitz linebackers to create 4 or 5-man fronts. But we still have to have consistency in the way we play our coverages. So that's something you'll see. I don't want to have to only be able to do it by personnel. I want to do it within each personnel, is be multiple in our multiple fronts, our multiple pressure packages, but then still have a lot of consistency in the way we cover and the different coverages we do play.
All right, we'll do one last call for questions. If you do have a question, please go ahead and raise your hand. In the meantime, we will go to Tyler James.
Marcus, your safety group will obviously look different in the fall with Kyle Hamilton back, but what have you learned about who may be able to start next to him and the depth that you have at that position?
I think Coach O'Leary's done a great job of being a new coach with a position that has obviously one of their top guys not practicing in the spring. And so I think the entire room as a whole has performed really well for the spring. Houston Griffin is a guy that's played here. Obviously we were able to get him to come back, and that's done a great job as our boundary safety in some packages, our field safety in some packages. DJ Brown has done a really good job of being consistent and understanding the details of the position. KJ Wallace has had a great spring. He showed up, and he continuously shows up, a guy that can play nickel, a guy that can play safety. The freshman has stepped up. Justin Walters, he's getting better, and you just see it again throughout practices, and Justin Walters and Litchfield and those guys are guys that they get better throughout the spring. And that's something we've been talking about is for guys that, and this goes for the entire defense, for guys that have been playing, each week has kind of been like a motto. Hey, what's the motto of the first week? And the first week was their freshman year. Hey, it's a new defense. You're trying to learn. We're excited. The second week was their sophomore year. Hey, you make the biggest jump from your freshman to sophomore year. And then their junior year was, hey, this was the grit. You know, that was the week of we had to really have grit and fight and find a way to grind through that third week. And now we're in the fourth week, which is they're going into their senior year is what I say. You know, hey, you're a fourth year senior and this is where we're going to have some attention to detail. And we got to make sure that we know the expectations, we know how to practice, we know the scheme. Now we really, really got to focus in on the attention to detail this week. And I use that analogy just as I talk about the safeties, but the entire defense, and that, hey, they've all made leaps and bounds from week one, and they're all improving, you know, and this is a big week for us, week 4, to have that attention to detail and understand that, hey, man, don't get comfortable within the scheme, you know, in that terms of getting relaxed. I'm not saying like confident, but relaxed. Don't get relaxed within the things we're doing. Understand what it takes to be successful. Understand the way you're demanded to practice, the way you're demanded to play, the standard that has been set, and that you guys have performed over the first 3 weeks, and let's continue to enhance that.
We'll go next to Pete Sampson.
Marcus, I want to follow up on Kyle Hamilton there. I know you don't have him, but do you have a sense of like his unique skill set and what that may be able to do for your scheme? And then another question entirely was, now that you've been here for a while and recruited here for a while, how has that been for you? And I was curious if you could sum up what sort of your recruiting philosophy is here with Notre Dame.
Okay. Yeah, Kyle, you look at Kyle and you can tell the skill set, a little bit of that he brings, you know, the length, you know, he brings to our defense, our back end is second to none. And so, you know, you can watch the film from last year, but until you see this guy live and in person, you don't realize, man, how long and how much room and area and space he can take up. And so the hardest thing for him is we got to continue to push him, even though he's not practicing. This would have been a great spring for him, you know, because I've been trying to use some of those guys that everybody respects, that have played a lot of ball, the Kurt Heinishes, the Myrons, you know, the Drew Whites. I've used them as the example a lot of times in our unit meetings and say, hey, man, either they, one, are performing to the standard, or 2, they're not. And so Kyle would have been perfect for that situation, but he's a film junkie. Him and Coach O'Leary are always in there watching film. He's always trying to find ways to improve. He's like a coach sometimes back there, and I see him coaching those young safeties up, and that's what he's got to do. You can't physically be out there, but mentally you got to strain your mind and push yourself to work, even with you not being out there. And so he's done a really good job, and I'm excited to get him back for the fall. As far as recruiting, we're going to continue to try to be the most aggressive and you know, hardest working, really, recruiting staff in the country. And that's just a goal of mine, and that's a philosophy of mine is, hey, well, let's outwork everybody in the country, you know, and that's in terms of evaluations, that's in terms of developing relationships. I think we've done a really good job of identifying the guys that we feel are the best players that fit Notre Dame. You know, and that's something I kind of said in our first press conferences. I think at times it can be easy to recruit at Notre Dame because you're Notre Dame and there's a certain group of kids that just would die to come to Notre Dame. But I think for us to continue to elevate and continue to try to be national champions and be able to close that gap between right now Alabama, and we got to continue to acquire some of the best football players in the country. And those guys might not always be, hey, dying to come to Notre Dame. But if we understand that they're the right fit and we do our research and they can be successful here at Notre Dame, our job is to convince them, to let these guys know, hey, what makes the University of Notre Dame special. And it's not hard to do once you're here. It's hard to convince somebody because they're not here, but when you're here, you almost wonder, like, where else would you go? But it's our job as a staff is to convince these guys that, hey, man, there is no better place to go in the country. And there's many different ways of trying to present that to them. But that's right now is our philosophy is, hey, we've identified the top 22 prospects, the 2022 prospects. Now let's continue every day, find ways to convince this family that, hey, the University of Notre Dame is second to none when it comes to your college experience, and it comes to the competitive side, the development side of you as a student athlete. There's nowhere else in the country that compares to it. And so every day we'll continue to work at it, Pete.
We'll go next to Tim Prister.
Talking about young safeties, you got some young corners there too, Coach. In addition to Bracy being the upperclassman, what are you seeing on Clarence Lewis? You've got some young guys. Coach Kelly talked about Cam Hart making an impression on him. Ramon Henderson, Riley. What can you tell me about those guys?
Well, Coach Macon's done a great job. You know, you've said it a lot. You just said it at the beginning of that question, is that Tariq has played a lot of ball. The rest of those guys, they might not be freshmen, but they haven't played a lot of ball. I know C. Lou played a lot last year, but still, he's still young in terms of experience. And so it's our job is to try to get those guys ready and develop them within these 15 practices. So as we get to the fall, they're in, that much closer to being game ready. And so there's a lot of competition within that room. There's a lot of skill set within that room. We just have to continue to develop them as corners. We have to develop them as a position. And I know Coach Mickens is doing a great job at doing that. They got a great group. It's an extremely close group that push each other. But the repetitions are the only way to develop that inexperience that they have. But the talent level is there. They are extremely talented group from top to bottom. And you'll see, to me, talent, is God-given for the most part, and we can develop as much as we want, but you're going to develop based off the talent that they have. And so that excites me because I know how talented they are. I know the speed and the athleticism that they possess. So I'm extremely excited to see them continue to develop the specifics of the position and to be able to go out there and perform at a high level, because we're going to need them for what we do defensively. You're going to need the cornerbacks to be high performers, and that's going to be important for us.
We'll go next to Eric Hansen.
Coach, Clark Lee had been, when Clark and Mike came in after Brian Van Gore, the kids were really eager to shift schemes. They hadn't had success. Clark had been pretty successful. Obviously, you have a great resume, but how easy or difficult was it to sell them on, we need to tweak the defense and play a little bit differently?
Well, I want to make sure I say this the right way. What Clark Lee and Mike Elko did before I got in this chair was unbelievable, and they set a standard for Notre Dame defense that it was my job to come in here and uphold that standard. And because we might do things a little bit different in terms of the overall picture of the scheme, hey, we might pressure a little more, we might move a little bit more. That doesn't mean that this scheme is better than that scheme or anything else like that. That just means, hey, it's a different way of actually playing defense, and what I convince these guys is that what I think it takes to have success and what we must believe it takes to have success has already been displayed before I ever got in this chair. And that's, to me, the effort and attitude you got to play with, the ability to get off blocks, the ability to tackle, and the ability to disrupt the ball. Those four things are why we'll have success. And I make sure they understand every time I stand in front of the room is that it's not because of any scheme that I brought here. It's because of the way we play, the effort and attitude, the way we defeat blocks, the way we tackle, and the way we disrupt the ball. That will be the reason we have success. And so we're going to do the scheme that obviously I'm most comfortable with, and they've all bought in. But I think hopefully they would all tell you it isn't the scheme as much as it's demands of the way you play the game, the standard of defense that they've already possessed. In the first unit meeting we had, I showed them, hey, here's what I view as successful defense. Here's what I view are the things it takes to have success on defense. And all I showed them was plays that they've already done. These different fundamentals they've already displayed. And so if we can continue to do this at a high level, we'll have success. And so, again, it's a lot of fun, man, to be able to come in here and coach some of the best players in the country that are hungry, that have already possessed the things that you think it takes to have success on defense.
All right, and that is all the time we have today. Thank you very much, Coach.